My name is Larry Krasner, and we're going to be talking about agent empowerment. What an exciting time for the life insurance industry. Last year was my first year, and it's just getting more engaged. A little bit about me: over 35 years of financial service experience. I grew up in the Big Four, McKinsey, and now I'm with EXL as a VP in client management and product development. So I want to introduce my panel, and then we'll get into the conversation. So let's start off with the right-hand side. Tony, would you lead us off with an introduction?
I'm Tony Lodato, Head of Partnerships and Innovation at Munich Re. Been in the life insurance industry now for almost 30 years, from product development through distribution, now on the reinsurance side. Kind of seen and done it all, actuary by trade. Really interested though to talk about sort of the agent experience and what's going on there. The 8 or 10 years or so that I spent on the distribution side, you learn an awful lot about what it takes to actually get these products delivered out to the marketplace. So excited to be here.
Thanks, Tony. Casey?
Hey, good morning, everyone. Casey Decker. You know that dream you have where you go to Vegas and you get off a plane and someone texts you to get on a panel and you get here in 40 minutes and get on stage? That's where we're at right now. Right. So I'm glad to be able to talk with all of you today. I spent over 17 years at FBL Financial, Farm Bureau Financial Services, multi-line carrier, a variety of different roles. I was in charge of distribution with the agents and driving sales and growth on that side. I was also the Chief Information Officer there for about 5 years. I took the pandemic and went to a different industry for the last couple of years. I went over to retail. I heard a lot about how retail was going to transform a lot of different industries. And so I ran e-commerce, about a $2 billion P&L for an e-commerce for retail, digital media, a whole host of different things. And recently came back into the industry with Sammons Financial Group, really helping them grow their wealth management firm and also some of the digital experiences as well. So great to be here.
So was the text message winner panel invitation? No chicken dinner, I'm sorry.
Other words were exchanged, yes.
Well, we're thrilled to be here. As you can get, we had some last-minute logistical problems with air travel, so we tried our best to substitute some real great panels for you. Sandeep, would you mind?
Sure, I'm not a last-minute add-on. I'm Sandeep Manchanda. I head M&A and partnerships for insurance at EXL. And I think first maybe I'll just give you a little introduction as to how I got here at EXL and maybe a little more of the background. So you can see where I'm credible and where I'm not. So you can put a tick mark out there. And I don't believe him when he says that. I joined EXL about 7 years ago, just in the start of our journey to becoming a digital transformation partner. And I started a group called the Analytical Products Group, and we have some AI/ML-based extraction, we have some payment integrity products that came out of it. And then soon I switched to really stitching together our capabilities in the life space. We had lead generation and marketing capabilities. We had a platform with a rules engine and e-app. We had admin platforms. We had medical reviews. We had operations. But we were going to market separately, just as carriers have their challenges in putting these silos together. So the idea was, can we really create a product launch platform that really combines everything? So the good news is that we have about 5 clients now as of this year, where we are launching products. We have a lot of these capabilities together, although some of them are nascent. There's some app-based lead generation is nascent. Our digital agency and call center are nascent out there. So it's still maturing. But this is what got me very excited about the life space, as to what we're doing in underwriting and agents and distribution. And now looking at the landscape to see where innovation is happening, what's new, what's better than EXL becomes just critical if we have to distribute products successfully out there. In terms of background, before that, I spent 15 years at Marsh & McLennan, and like you, I was CIO there for 5 years, so got to know the broker space very well. And at Zurich, I was Chief Data Officer there, spent 5 years over there. And I also spent some completely crazy off the chart in animal science space, getting products through out there for about 4 years. So I have some startup experience and some large company experience.
Fantastic, thank you. Andy, you're next.
Yeah, thanks, Larry. Yeah, I also got that early morning text message, you want to come be a pitch hitter, so it's great to be here. When I got the message, I thought maybe Brian wanted to introduce me to a potential client, but instead he wasn't on the panel. But no, I'm very glad to be here. I'm with Exavalue. We're a digital consulting and implementation firm. Prior to joining Exavalue, I've had about 30 years in experience, mostly in life. Like Dustin, I grew up. My father was out selling life insurance policies when I was young, and I saw the market from a very early age. Spent some time at carriers and software vendors and SI companies, and probably spent a lot of that time wishing I was in P&C and not life, because the money was flowing, the technology was exciting, but I think now's a great time to be in life, as it's catching up, and we're seeing a lot of exciting things going on. So
Fantastic.
Great to be here this morning.
Thank you. Fantastic panel. I think the theme that we want to hit on is the life insurance industry is changing dramatically. Digital acquisition, data and analytics are really driving simplification. As Dustin talked about, direct-to-consumer is growing and growing. So we're trying to understand the new role of the agent going forward and how technology is simplifying and enabling him to do a better job, a more effective job, and really driving speed to market in everything he does. So some of the core themes that we want to cover with you today is what are the changing trends, so that you can get a sense on the personas and what the wants and needs of the agents are, and how that has been shifted as a result of the new paradigm that we're in. We want to get into product innovation, because to a large extent, the new products will change how agents sell their products to the marketplace and how they interact with them. We also want to talk about underwriting enablement, because that's a big piece of the equation. And then we want to talk about turnover, because given the place that the agents are in right now, turnover is a major concern. So that said, let's kick off. Casey, would you mind kind of leading us off in terms of what the agent trends are, specifically maybe hit on some of the demographic shifts?
Yeah, I mean, things have changed, but a lot of the things still remain the same. I mean, I think I got a unique perspective of even 2 years from the industry and looking from the outside in. And, some of the things that are constant still are an efficient, simple process that fits in how I work and how I operate in office. And a lot of times technology can kind of get in the way of a relationship product, a relationship business. And so how do you simplify that? How do you dull the edges between technology and people and make that work? And so I still think it's a big theme. In that goes demographics, and really where we sit. It is, from an industry standpoint, on the producer side, an aging population. Whether you're talking about life insurance, whether you're talking about property casualty, whether you're talking about wealth advisors, those problems remain the same. So I think succession planning, I think adoption of technology and the different demographics that you have in a given office does create some complications and some changes there. And I think that's still very much a focus of a carrier and from an insurance agent perspective.
Absolutely, the demographics are getting older. Andy, do you have a point of view in terms of what the carriers are doing today to address that problem?
Sure, yeah. Like you said, they are getting much older. I've mentioned my father was in the business. He's 81 years old. He's still out selling insurance, but all his friends that were there when the insurance really took off in the 70s and the 80s, they're all moving out of the industry, and they're being replaced. But it's a different skill set now. They're not just looking to replace them with younger guys that do the same thing. People are looking for different things from their agent. They're looking for more of a universal agent that provides a well-rounded financial planning advice that just goes beyond selling them a life insurance policy. I remember when I was young, we'd drive over to somebody's house on the other side of Pittsburgh just to get a signature on a form. Like, no one's doing that anymore. The technology is there for that. But the technology won't replace the agent in life and annuities like it has in P&C and some other lines of business.
That brings up a very excellent point. As it looks in terms of the technology digital experience, what are the agents really looking for? Tony, would you take a stab at that?
Yeah, sure. Just as a little bit of perspective, so my son actually for about the last 2 years has been right when COVID started. He actually started becoming an agent for a very large mutual company, which I will keep their name out of it for now. But it was very apparent of what they needed and what they needed very quickly. You know, the whole world changed in a matter of about 2 weeks of companies that still did do a lot of things sort of by hand. And so how does someone new coming into the industry be able to understand first, how do I become an agent? How do I sell? What are those things that I do? But now try to understand a brand new system that they're putting in place that they had never adopted before. Sort of the shock of COVID, I think, really put into perspective what these companies need to do and how fast that they needed to change. This is not an industry that changes fast. I think we all know that. But the change that happened in those 2 years, I think, is going to put a mark sort of really going forward of what companies need to do. I mean, we heard Dustin talk a lot about it, but we're starting to see a lot of sort of new innovation now around that technology side of just what's needed and how do I start to then grow the top of my funnel. It's just different than it was in the past. It was about sort of your personal network, what you had. Now you start getting into digital and digital marketing. It's a very different skill set, I think, today than it was in the past, yeah.
So as the carriers are trying to take a look at the digital channels, the direct-to-consumer strategies, distribution, optimization, the agents must be very, very frustrated in terms of not understanding really what they own and what they'll control going forward. Casey, can you kind of share with us, the group here, what you see as some of the voice of the agent in dealing with the frustration and how technology is solving those problems?
Yeah, I think I'd start with kind of going back to what I talked about. I don't think it's a new problem, right? I think there's been change throughout this industry. If you roll it all the way back from the last couple decades, right? Technology has played a big part in our industry, and data's been at the core of that since the very beginning, right? I think from an agent standpoint, what's changing though is what you talked about: a line of sight and a little bit of understanding and control of how I go and interact with my clients, how I can sell the product, what I know is behind the scene, and I can set expectations of what that's going to flow. Right. It's kind of out of their control a little bit more than when I had pen and paper and I could go on and write it and I knew exactly where I'd probably stand in certain classes or certain products. And so right now, some of those challenges I think carriers are trying to solve is how do we get efficiencies? Because, you know, there's also the element of growth as an industry, and you can't invest more without more growth. And so I think it's about execution. And so it comes down to, from an agent standpoint, I get digitalization, I get the need of it, I use it every day of my life. It's not like they're not for it, but how does it help me win? How does it help my staff be more efficient? And at the end of the day, can we just execute and make it work day one? Look, I've been in IT a long time, I get that all the time, I know it's easier said than done, but I think from their voice, it's how do you make it easier and how do you deliver it without some of the bumps in the road?
One of the core ways that companies are making it easier is through data and analytics. Sandeep, will you mind kind of sharing your thoughts on what is happening with data analytics, specifically in enabling the agent and helping that experience, resolving some of the frustrations we've just heard?
I think it's happening both ways. So data and analytics is not just for the agent, but also for the carriers. So some of the things that we've observed, I think maybe we can talk about if that's your experience too. It's an 80-20. 20% of the agents are really bringing in the business, 80% of the agents are just cruising out there. And then when you look at independent agents, there's a huge challenge with how are we going to pass them leads, how do we enable them, are we actually going to benefit from all the efforts that we put in to enable them? So that's where the analytics are really coming in. Number one, we're actively involved in seeing how agent recruitment has to evolve and change. So we are actually using social media and other analytics to see that we attract the right kind of agents, so we don't have that 80-20 mix anymore. And even if we do, how can we actually turn that over in a different way? And then I do think that there is a whole challenge in independent agents that needs to be addressed in the industry. And it was brought up earlier, you brought it up too, right? It's the financial advisors. I mean, people just don't have an insurance need anymore. You could be disabled. You could have a long-term care need out there. You don't have enough retirement income, and Whole Food, your whole life policies are not covering all your retirement income out there. So you need to have some defined contribution plans. You need to have some annuities going. So the market has completely changed as to what the consumer needs are. And to me, the analytics become critical to enabling the independent agent. If we cannot have proper attribution, if we cannot have proper integration of our direct-to-consumer channels as to what's going to go to the agent, how are they going to enable it, which products we are going to work with them on with true analytics, the carriers are going to lose money, the agents are going to lose interest in that. I think these elements are all crucial. And then there is the standard stuff about measuring customer experience with real data and what the impact is of different campaigns and different actions. So data is clearly the foundation out here, given the changes that are happening in the industry.
Andy, would you like to elaborate on how you're seeing data is the foundation in terms of the criticality?
We are, and I think this ties also a lot into the underwriters and the data that's available to the underwriters now. A lot of the carriers we've been talking to and the agents we've been talking to are frustrated that the underwriters aren't making use of the data that's available, and they're still going with the same questionnaires they've been using for years when there's data out there that could eliminate all of that and speed a lot of that up. So we've seen that from a lot of carriers and a lot of agents as well, to use that data to speed things up and provide better decisioning faster.
And we'll cover some of that in the underwriting section as well. Some people say that life, wealth management, and some other aspects of health are merging. So when you think about the convergence of a couple of the industries out there, Tony, this is for you. Think about the agents of the future. If I was to take a look at 5 years from now, a backward aspect. What does that agent look like today, and how is that different than the agent today?
Yeah, I mean, the holistic view, I think, back to the customer, you know, the industry today generally has been very, very specialized. People have sort of stayed in their lanes. They've done what they know. They know the processes that they've done to be successful over time. I think when we start looking forward to sort of what does the new agent look like, it's sort of a step back to be able to say, where is the client, where do they like and need to transact, but then what then too are those product services that need to be sort of wrapped around all of that as well. I think from an insurance company point of view, all the way through the agencies themselves, again, it's been back to they were specialists in areas. And that's how they drove value to their clients, because they were deep specialists. I don't know that people are necessarily looking for specialists all the time now. I think it's much more of a one-stop shop world. I think generally from a consumer point of view, that's where a lot of us are. And so how does the industry actually start to step back and pull all that together in a way that can actually serve the customer need probably a lot better than it is today?
Casey, we made a lot of references to things that are in play, and you're making a point of saying a lot of this is not new. But from your perspective, are there things that are not being addressed in terms of meeting the agent's needs to help them get there better, faster, cheaper, and service the customer in a more efficient manner? What is not already in play?
I think I'll just follow up with an answer because I think you hit it right on. I mean, I think the transition that you're seeing from a producer standpoint is moving away from a products to a service type of model. I mean, back in the day, it was all about the product. I'm selling a product, and less on the service side. And I think the transition is how do I have a platform that makes it easier for me to be a relationship or service-based agent? I mean, CRMs have been around for a long time. I'd argue that they're probably the most under-leveraged asset that's available from an agent standpoint. I've been on stage over the decades trying to train agents, convince agents, just to enter that one task, right? And it just gets in the way. And so I think, how do we provide the data? How do we provide the information? And then how do you kind of create that hub and spoke where specialists can come in when they need to on the products? And at the same time, I can have a conversation with Casey and not feel like I'm going back and forth between a system, but I have the things at my fingertips to be able to have those conversations. That ideal is still fractured right now, and so trying to find that one way to do that, I think is the pursuit.
Sandeep, people argue that insurance is sold, not bought. Can you elaborate on the conversation in terms of how we're going to change that paradigm? And you made mention about data and analytics, and we made mention about tech enablement. What can happen? Will it happen? I know we have a crystal ball here today. What do you see as how that shifts in terms of a more even playing field in terms of consumer understanding how insurance fits into their full wealth management perspective?
I'd say I have a definition, and maybe we can agree or disagree on that definition. I think something needs to be sold if you do not have enough information about the life event, the customer, the segment, their needs, so that something can be put in front of them and it'll be bought. So very simply, without analytics, without understanding who your consumer is, going to your neighbors, going to your friends and everyone and pushing one product that you have, which requires a lot of paperwork and some underwriting, of course it needs to be sold. That's not what the future is, right? No. So the future, no, it's not going to be sold. It's going to be bought. But it's going to be a transition. And that transition is what we are looking at in our industry. Every time we had D2C, I mean, we talked about Besto, we talked about Ethos, right? For the most part, especially when we talk in embedded settings, they're bought. They're not sold. And at the same time, they're partnering with agents to bring in the sale there for customers and segments where they're not hitting the right life event out there. So yes, it will continue to be sold. And I personally think that the new products that are going to come in, they will require selling. You start explaining to a consumer how your insurance premium will divide up into disability, LTC, and term insurance, and how you can change the ratios. I'm hoping we're going to have some products like that, so we actually take care of the holistic needs of the consumer. It'll be tough to just get that be bought, right? I think that's where the agent role will come in. I think the agent role is very critical in transforming the industry, but the agent role and education is going to be very different. That's needed. And I also think that a whole new partnership has to form for this to evolve. I think I heard of the UK market. What they had at one point done, which apparently was a key event, was no matter what was being bought, if it was in an agent's area, they got commission. And somehow one company started, another one followed, and they have not had real channel conflicts, and they've really worked together with agents very, very well. And the market is pretty advanced in terms of straight-through processing and selling, although not so much on data analytics. But that's my definition.
I think everyone would argue that we're painting a very beautiful, brave new world for the agents in the future, but the reality is not all agents are going to be able to change. Andy, can you kind of give us a sense of what agents are not going to be able to adopt this new way of working, and what carriers are doing to address this?
Right. So I think Tony mentioned earlier, you have agents were much more specialized in the past. You might have had an agent that all they sold was high risk life, and you just couldn't sell any other products. That's what they specialized in, and that probably is going away. And they're not going to train new agents to only do that. As those agents get through and work towards retirement, the new agents are going to be more generalists, and they're going to know, if someone's high risk, sure, I'll be able to sell them a high risk life policy, but they might have a lot of other needs that have nothing to do with life insurance, and that's where the agents are going to have to become more broad and more generalist to reach that market.
Absolutely. So now let's shift gears and get into some product innovation. I think the industry is really embracing digital and digitalization differently, and I'm seeing a lot of carriers introduce new products that really address the whole risk parameter. I would characterize, I've seen more on the P&C than on the life side thus far, but I think Dustin introduces some with the diabetes elements, some new things that are out there that are right around the corner. So Sandeep, can you kind of give us a sense on what you see the product innovation, and how quick are we going to actually see this come to market, and how is it going to make the agents even more powerful?
I think Dustin covered so much that I think you saw all the innovation happening, the Vitality, the diabetes product. I talked about possibly combining disability and other products together. So I think the innovation, to me, when we looked at our end-to-end platform and service, I think the segment, the product, the experience, and distribution, those were the key elements. To the extent the platform supports all that, yes, it's needed and it's important, but that's what really needs to drive it. I think the main issue that I think everyone has to grapple with is how to really put all this together, look at it holistically. And I think you mentioned that there. And that's where the innovation is going to come from. I think traditionally, product innovation has started more from the actuarial and risk perspective with some input from distribution. I think the future will come straight from the consumer and the distributor and the agent, and then move into, okay, how do we really settle this with the actuarial and underwriting talent that we have out there? And that's already happening. So I see innovation happening, but I think the other barrier I see is the speed of product introduction and product launches. If we cannot fail quickly and learn from it and do the next variation of the product and understand whether we failed on distribution or underwriting or in terms of our customer experience, we can't take that learning and then innovate to the next product out there. So I see some challenges because of the way the legacy debt that we have and the silos that we have there. But we also see some great examples of new products coming out. I love the diabetes product, and I can see the cancer-free product. For people who have recovered from cancer, there's a clear indication of what data you need to have and how you can connect mortality to that. So I see a lot of these products coming. And hopefully we can all look at the ecosystem, including like Sureify, and see how we put it together to create innovation there.
Sure. Tony, I want you to kind of layer on top of that in terms of agent readiness. Product innovation is coming. Hopefully there's going to be more iterations of new products. The consumer is telling us what their wants and needs are, so the products are going to be adaptive and drive agility and speed to market. The platforms are going to be ready to go. How are the agents ready to meet that need today? Are the carriers training them and preparing for that new platform mentality?
Yeah. The transition, I think, in sort of how that's going to happen is going to be really important, right? Because historically, when we think about product development, sort of back for the last maybe 10, 15, 20 years, most of the products have been developed because the customer actually wasn't the end insured. The customer was actually distribution and making sure that they had products on the shelf that could fill out their tool belts to be successful to go sell. So we're in the middle of this transition right now where now it's becoming consumer first. And so how do you then mix and match some of the distribution need along with the consumer need? Because again, I think some of the specialization is going to start going away. And that's kind of what we saw on the product side. I actually see the product could go two ways. One, it could be very sort of niche, smaller, very sort of agile products where you can get them out, you can get them into market very fast for different audiences even within submarkets. Or you can get to the more sort of generalized product covering multiple risks. I think there's space for both of those, but I see that there's going to be sort of innovation across the board. So when we think about the agent and just how they're going to have to go through and manage that, I think it's going to be more around training and how they're going to be flexible as just the products that they're bringing into their own tool belts. So I think you're going to start to see agents, although be a little more generalized, still start to fill different needs for the consumer, but still trying to think of that customer holistically. I think channel conflict is always one of the pieces, though, that we're sort of always dealing with. And to me, probably, I think in that transition, the limiting of channel conflict will be one of the most important issues. So if there are people who are still specializing, they can find effective ways to work together. Sure. Honestly, the industry's not really found a great way to avoid channel conflict yet.
Casey, if we think about the last question as more the tip of the sphere in terms of where the rubber meets the road, if we take a look at the entire value chain, are we thinking that as organizations shift from a target operating model focused on traditional to more product-centric, are the agents going to be able to adapt to the end-to-end value chain implications?
Yeah, I think the question is not just for the agents, are the carriers going to be able to adapt to that? Because I think the question on channel conflict is, in my opinion, it has to be leaned into as a partnership model, because those jagged lines just don't work from a consumer standpoint. And so I think to follow up onto that question, maybe to answer that one, I do see a world of more embedded products and more of a platform standpoint where I get the need or the risk when I need it, how I need it, and it's more specialized to me, and that comes through data, that comes through personalization. You know, being in the retail side, the amount of first-party data and how that goes into selling and propositioning and prospecting at the moment that you need it, we haven't even scratched the surface on the financial service side to kind of do that. And so if you think about the macro trends, health, wealth, I mean, those are going to impact all of us for the next 5 years. So how does health insurance, living in that world too, that ripe for innovation, and then wealth kind of come together where it's a little bit more embedded? And then to the question is, how do agents adapt to that? How do carriers incentivize them? How do they position them to succeed in that world? How do we arm them with the right information and not make it an either or, but an and conversation? So I think it's going to be a whole industry movement more than an agent movement or a carrier movement.
Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to have time to go through the whole comp structure.
Well, Nick might send me another.
The whole comp structure
I might get another
element
text
is
for
going to be
afternoon,
too complex for this panel, but maybe next year. Sandeep, in terms of if that's more of the end-to-end aspect, can you take a look at specifically underwriting implications in enabling the agent?
Yep. So I think first I just want to add a little bit to that, because I think there's an analogy that came to me. You know, Best Buy at one time was not doing very well because people would go to the store and then go buy online. Right. And then Hubert Joly, who was the CEO at that time, I don't know, somebody must have come up with the idea. And they said, if you want your product in our store, you got to pay for the product to just be there. And I don't care where it's bought. And we get a certain percentage of the sales there, and we get money for having the product there. So in some ways, they were dealing with this channel conflict and how do we get revenue from it. And I do think that the product is going to be sold directly, it's going to be sold embedded, and the agent is like that Best Buy store. They have full knowledge of the products that they need to have. So in some cases, they just educate the consumers. They still get some credit for it. In some cases, they actually sell it directly. But it has to evolve to something like that. And I think within that context, when you look at underwriting, right? To me, the way underwriting fits in is the experience layer. Yeah. The customer wants something, but guess what? They're not going to buy it if they don't have the right experience for it. And they may not understand it to buy it if they don't have the right experience. So underwriting has to start taking that into account. Underwriting is just not there to see what the box and guidelines are and make sure that's followed, but it has to be done that providing the right customer experience there. So to me, that's the simple change that's coming about out there. And to me, you know, you talked about consumer data, but then there's also medical data, there's the epigenetic data, there's, you know, so much data that's available that can go into underwriting. But I think it still needs to start a little bit at the actuarial and reinsurance level, because underwriting is going to then act on that. And it also goes into product design. So I know we can talk underwriting, but it's not just the underwriting group that determines how the final experience turns out.
Sure. So Andy, this question's for you. Through the panel, we've talked about the future state for the agent. We've talked about the current state and the gap. That said, we've also made mention that we have an aging population in terms of the demographics. What are the carriers doing to address the retention issue. This is huge because if they can't put in a pipeline of young people to replace, there could be a problem. So can you address the retention for the audience?
I think the agents, and I'd love to hear from the other panelists if you see this as well. What we've seen a lot is the agents feel like they've been left behind. The digital took off, and even as far back as 2000, 2002, and it was all focused on direct to consumer. And the agents, I think, were left behind, and they kind of thought they were being pushed out, and everyone was just going to sell life direct to consumer, and they'd be, looking for a new job. And that was a mistake I think the industry made, and the carriers made it, and technology made it as well. But it's exciting to see now, products like Sureify and others that are focusing on that. And there's a lot of data now that's available, and the API revolution, and companies like MuleSoft that can make use of that and provide data back to the carriers has really kind of caught up where the agents were left off. And I think that's going to help the retention. Agents want these tools, and they want to be able to sell faster. They want to get their commission right away. They don't want to have to, wait months to get it. And these digital tools are really accelerating that.
So beyond the comm structure, Tony, anything else the carriers are doing to address retention?
Yeah, I think when we think about their block, how they can continue to grow their block, the hand-to-hand combat of individual sales is very difficult. So from a carrier point of view, I think the things that they can do from a digital technology point of view is how can they help create their funnel, make their funnel bigger, and how do they help them increase their close rates on that? So, they could start to exponentially grow their businesses if they can spend more time closing sales, less time finding them. And so there's a lot on sort of the data side, I think, that can be done to help build their funnels in a way that's going to get sort of better business with them, and they're not sort of spending time on, policies maybe that have been smaller or things that they just haven't had time to sort of chase down over the years. How do you start to then create more of a volume game for a lot of these people that are out there as well?
Nancy, do we have time for a question from the audience?
Actually, you guys have been doing a really good job, kind of being prescient about what questions people are asking. A lot of them are around demographics, and I think you guys answered this, but do you see that offering digital technology is critical for recruiting the next generation of agents?
I'll take a stab. You can jump.
Sure.
Just from my standpoint, there is still a bright future for the agent. I just firmly believe that. I think back to my wealth and health elements. People still want a throat to choke. That's what I say. When things go bad, I want to know someone's going to be accountable for it, and is going to be there, and is going to be an expert to help me. Now, how you recruit people into the industry, that's the million-dollar question on that 2-year benchmark and the 4-year benchmark of how you bring people in and sell that. I think technology, a part of investment, is that ease of coming in and getting to the hand-to-hand combat and making selling, marketing, operations easier. If I'm going still onto a thick client, mainframe-backed kind of application, and I'm trying to recruit someone that's a little younger into the generation, that's going to be a tough call, bringing them in, or a tough sell. And so I think it's very critical to it, but technology is a wide range. What that means for an agent tool, what that means for a client tool, what that means for actuary and underwriting into the manufacturing of it. But I do think technology is a big part of recruitment. It probably isn't the main seller. It's reducing the barrier to come into it with income, and then giving them the scale and or the resources to be successful in those first 2 or 4 years.
Yeah, one of the things I see on that too is just, I just sort of talk about that speed is sort of the new currency. So, throughout the whole value chain of how that process happens, new people coming into the industry are used to things working in a certain way, right?
All right.
And if it's not sort of living up to that standard, they know they can go into some other industry, sort of do something else. So I just counsel people, speed. Like throughout that whole value chain, where can you start to improve the process and the speed while not giving up, it's making the business riskier or anything like that. But how do you start to trade off some of the things that you've done to help increase that speed over time?
Even the onboarding process, right? Could be
even the onboarding process, right?
Awesome, guys. Thanks so much. That's all we have time for.
All right.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Panelists, great job.
Thank you.
That's great.
Thank you very much.